Not in the name of the Most High.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا طاهرا مباركا فيه، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا من لدنك علما نافعا يا أرحم الراحمين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and peace and blessings be upon His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We had ended last week with the bay'ah that was given to Yazid ibn Muawiyah, and how Yazid ibn Muawiyah had become the Khalifa of the Muslimin, and the way in which the Khilafah was passed down from Muawiyah radiallahu anhu to his son Yazid, and how the Sahaba who were around at that time did not accept the bay'ah of Yazid radiallahu anhu, or some of the Sahaba who were around at that time did not accept the bay'ah of Yazid radiallahu anhu. Most significant of companions were Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu and Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Those were the two main companions who had not accepted or had not given their bay'ah to Yazid radiallahu, or to Yazid, and that in itself opened the door now for Yazid wanting to insist. And that was from the main mistakes of Yazid, is that Yazid, he insisted that both Al-Hussein and Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhuma give him bay'ah. They were the two obstacles in front of him, and his insisting on that was the first spark of the fitna that led to what we'll be speaking about, the death of Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu wa arda. Radiallahu anhu wa arda. And that's why both Al-Hussein and Abdullah ibn Zubayr, they had felt threatened by Yazid, and they were fearful for their life, so they both left Medina and they went to Mecca. And they stayed in Mecca knowing that they'll be safe in Mecca from anyone who would try to come to them, because they are both from Quraysh. Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu is from Quraysh, from Mecca, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr is originally also from Mecca. His father Az-Zubayr is also originally from Mecca, so they both headed towards Mecca to have security within Mecca itself. Now when the people of Al-Kufa, which was the main city in Al-Iraq at that time, when they heard that Al-Hussein did not give his bay'ah to Yazid, did not announce his bay'ah to Yazid, and that he went and he left to Mecca, they began to write to him. They began to write to Al-Hussein, and these letters began coming in to Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu. And as some of the sources mention, like Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, mention that over 100,000 names had came to Al-Hussein in or standing with him and seeking for him to come to Al-Kufa to give him bay'ah. The people of Al-Kufa sending letters to Al-Hussein saying that we have not yet given bay'ah to Yazid, and we want you to come so that we can give you bay'ah. These were the letters and the messages that were sent from Al-Kufa to Al-Hussein. And they began to tell him that you need to come, and that we will give you bay'ah, and that we will stand with you, and that we will give you victory, and we don't accept the bay'ah of Yazid. And these words that were sent to Al-Hussein, and the numbers that were mentioned that were sent to Al-Hussein, that they are waiting for him to come to Al-Kufa so that they can give him bay'ah. So that they can give him bay'ah. And this is mentioned in the sources of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Now when all of these letters and all of this news began to come to Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, Al-Hussein is not someone who's just going to say yes, raise his hand and say, Yalla, I'm coming to Al-Kufa. He wanted to make sure that what? He wanted to make sure that the news that was coming to him was authentic. He wanted to make sure that the people of Al-Kufa, they actually have his back and that they are wanting him to come and that they are requesting him to come. So Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, he sent his cousin Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Al-Abbas. Aqil radiallahu anhu is the son of Al-Abbas. Al-Abbas being the uncle of Ali radiallahu anhu. So he sent his first cousin. He sent his first cousin, someone that he trusts. He sent him to Al-Kufa to make sure that the news that was being received by him from the people of Al-Kufa is correct. And that they want him to come to Al-Kufa. And they want him to arrive to Al-Kufa with the promise that they had already promised him. So when he first arrived, when Muslim ibn Aqil first arrived to Al-Kufa, the first day he was given the promise by 12,000 men. 12,000 men gave him the promise that they will give Al-Hussein the bay'ah. And that they will give the bay'ah to Al-Hussein at that time. Now here, one important thing that we have to remember is that the companions like Al-Hussein and Abdullah ibn Zubayr, they didn't accept the bay'ah of Yazid. They didn't accept the bay'ah of Yazid. Why? Because they didn't see it as a legitimate pledge of allegiance. They saw it to be an incorrect bay'ah. Why? Because as we mentioned, Muawiyah had already mentioned Yazid as the successor of his on his life, and he took bay'ah on that while he was still alive. While Muawiyah was still alive, he took bay'ah and he took the promise of bay'ah at the time of his life for his son Yazid, which was wrong. And even the Sahaba who later on gave bay'ah to Yazid, like Abdullah bin Abbas, Abdullah bin Umar and so forth, they gave bay'ah hiqnan lid-dima, so that they can what? So that they can stop and not allow for any bloodshed. But Al-Hussein and Abdullah ibn Zubayr didn't see the legitimacy of the bay'ah to Yazid. They didn't see it as a legitimate pledge of allegiance. And that's why they rejected it. And that's why they didn't accept it. So when the people of Al-Kufa are sending to Al-Hussein, saying to him that come to Al-Kufa and we'll stand with you and we'll give you the legitimate bay'ah, you are more worthy of it than Yazid. You are more worthy of it than Yazid. And there were many men at that time from the companions who were more worthy of it than Yazid. And we mentioned why Muawiyah gave the bay'ah to his son to begin with. And what his intentions were. Whether his intentions were correct or weren't correct, whether the outcome was correct or wasn't correct, we believe that Muawiyah radiallahu anhu is a companion. And the respect that is due to him is the respect that is due to a companion, regardless if he made a fault, regardless if he made a mistake. Muawiyah, he's a companion. Yazid is not a companion. Yazid is not a companion. So that's why Al-Hussein, when the news arrived to him, then he sent his cousin to make sure that that news is correct, it is authentic, and that his cousin Muslim ibn Aqil, he went to Al-Kufa and he made sure that the news was correct, and he stayed in the house of Hani ibn Urwa, one of the also people of the followers of Al-Hussein. And he stayed with him in his house. When he was assured of that which was taking place, he sent for Al-Hussein and he told him to come to Al-Kufa. He sent to Al-Hussein saying that, oh, Hussein, فَإِنَّ الرَّائِدَ لَا يُكَذِّبُ أَهْلَهُ. The one who has come to see and witness does not lie. Yani Muslim ibn Aqil, he has come to Al-Kufa and he has seen Al-Kufa and that they are accepting and they're wanting of Al-Hussein. فَإِنَّ الرَّائِدَ أَهْلَهُ لَا يَكْذِب. Doesn't lie, because I have seen it with my own eyes. إِنَّ جَمِيعَ أَهْلَ الْكُوفَةِ مَعَكَ. All of Ahl al-Kufa are with you. فأقبل حين تنظر في رسالة أو فانظر فينا تنظر في كتابي. come to Al-Kufa when you read or when you receive my letter. Come to Al-Kufa. So Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, he prepares himself to go towards Al-Kufa now, after receiving the news from his cousin Muslim ibn Aqil, that they are going to follow him and that they want to give him the pledge of allegiance. And as we'll come to see, that at the end, prior to the actual confrontation between Al-Hussein and his family and between the army of Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, his intention wasn't to go there just because he wanted the Khilafah. Because when Al-Hussein got there and he saw that the people of Al-Kufa, they retracted their initial sort of backing towards him, he left. He said, I don't want this. I only came here because they wanted Al-Hussein. So we'll come to see that. So Al-Hussein, he prepared himself to leave. Now the governor of Al-Kufa at that time, An-Nu'man ibn Bashir, radiallahu anhu, when the news got out, now the news is spreading in Al-Kufa, that the people are giving bay'ah to Al-Hussein, that the people are wanting to follow Al-Hussein. An-Nu'man ibn Bashir, radiallahu anhu, who's a known companion, he stood as a khatib and he gave a khutbah. And he said, Ittaqullaha ibadallah, O followers of all slaves of Allah, fi Allah, wala tusari'u ila al-fitnati wal-furqa. Do not hasten towards fitna and do not hasten towards disunity. فإن فيها يهلك الرجال. In it the men will what? The men will die. وتسفك الدماء. And the blood is shed. وتغصب الأموال. And the wealth is taken from its people. He says, إني لم أقاتل من لا يقاتلني. I'm not going to fight those who do not fight me. ولا أثب على من لا يثب علي. I'm not going to pounce on those who do not pounce upon me. ولكن إن نكثتم بيعتكم. If you retract your bay'ah that you have already taken, وَخَالَفْتُمْ إِمَامَكُمْ, and you go against your imam, which is Yazid at that time, the Khalifa Yazid. فَوَاللَّهِ الَّذِي لَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ, by the one that there is no Lord but him, لَأَضْرِبَنَّكُمْ بِسَيْفِي, I will strike you with my sword. مَا ثَبَتَ قَائِمَهُ فِي يَدِي, so long as it is sturdy within my hand. أَمَّا أَنِّي أَرْجُ أَن يَكُونَ مَنْ يَعْرِفَ الْحَقَّ مِنْكُمْ أَكْثَرَ مِمَّنْ يُرْدِيهِ بِالْبَاطِلِ. He said, I'm hoping that those who know the truth from amongst you are more than those who are going to follow the falsehood. And this is mentioned in Tarikh al-Tabari, rahimahullah ta'ala. So this was the response of An-Nu'man ibn Bashir, reminding them not to follow the fitna, not to go with the fitna, and not to go with the disunity. Now this itself did not, this approach of An-Nu'man ibn Bashir, which was a soft but stern approach. Soft in a way that advising them, and stern in a way that if you're going to go against, then it's going to be a bad outcome. This in itself this approach didn't go well with the followers of Bani Umayyah. The followers of Bani Umayyah did not like this approach. They wanted a more firmer approach. So when the news came to Yazid, he removed An-Nu'man from his position and he placed instead of him Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And remember that name. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad at that time was the governor of Al-Basra, which is next to or in the area. And then when he became governor of Al-Kufa, he became governor of both areas, Al-Basra wal Kufa. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. He was the governor of Al-Kufa at that time, and he became the governor of Al-Kufa wal Basra. And he was ordered by Yazid to prevent anyone from giving bay'ah to Al-Hussein with whatever means possible, whatever means necessary, to stop the people from giving bay'ah to Al-Hussein. Now when Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was appointed as the wali of Al-Kufa, he entered Al-Kufa. He's a very intelligent man. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is a very intelligent, very switched on person. He entered Al-Kufa, covered himself, covered his face. He entered Al-Kufa, and when he entered Al-Kufa, the people thought that it was Al-Hussein. The people thought that it was Al-Hussein. So they began to give him salams and they began to welcome him. We have been waiting for you, Al-Hussein. We've been waiting for you to come. So when he heard that from them, he realized that what was being said is true. He realized that what is being said is true, and he was affirmative on that which was taking place in Al-Kufa. So he began to gather his what? He began to gather his intelligence, and he was able to penetrate the circle of Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim ibn Aqil is like the representative of Al-Hussein in Al-Kufa, getting the information, getting the people. So Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad was able to penetrate this circle of Muslim ibn Aqil and get the information needed from Muslim ibn Aqil, from the circle, and that he knew that he was staying at the house of Hani ibn Urwa. And I'm trying to mention the minimal amount of names as possible, because there's a lot of names. But these are the important names. So Hani ibn Urwa was the one whom had Muslim ibn Aqil staying with him. So Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he arrested Hani ibn Aqil. He brought in Hani ibn Aqil, and he ordered for him to bring and to give up Muslim ibn Aqil. He ordered Hani, he said, you have to give me now Muslim. He is the one who's coming and doing this, you have to give him up. He said, والله لا تفارقني حتى تأتيني بمسلم ابن عقيل. فقال هانئ أو يجمل بي أن أسلم ضيفي وجاري للقتل. He said, you're not leaving me until you bring me Muslim. He said, is it nice for me to hand over my guest and the one who was staying with me for death? Is it nice of me to hand over my guest? والله لا أفعل ذلك أبدا. He said, I will never do that at all. So he copped a beating, and he was hit, Hani ibn Aqil, and he was placed under arrest, and he was made to give up information about Hani or about Muslim. But he stayed firm, and he didn't give up Muslim ibn Aqil. So to that extent, it went. Now when Muslim ibn Aqil, the news reached him that Hani ibn Urwa was hit by Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. Ubaidullah is who? Who's Ubaidullah? The governor of Al-Kufa. He's the governor. So Ubaidullah, when Muslim ibn Aqil, the cousin of Ali, of Al-Hussein, when he heard that Ubaidullah had hit Hani, he gathered the people who were with him, and he gathered the supporters, and he surrounded the house of the governor. He surrounded the house of the governor to put pressure on him to release Hani. To release Hani. Now at that time he had 4,000 men with him. 4,000 men with him, as mentioned in Tarikh al-Tabari. Had 4,000 men with him, and they went to the castle of, or the house of Ibn Ziyad. And Ibn Ziyad, he entered into his house and he closed the door. Before he did that, he gathered all of the leaders of the tribes of Al-Iraq or Al-Kufa at that time, and all of the honorable men, and he took them inside with him. He knows what he's doing. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he knows what he is doing. So when he entered, or when he went in, he used them as a what? As a means to pressure the followers who were surrounding the house of Hani. He took in the leaders, the honorable men, the high positioned men within the society at that time, and he entered into the house, and then he used them as pressure. He used them as pressure upon the followers. And then he began to use them to scare the people. So they'll tell them that, or they'll remind them of the peace and security. Then they'll remind them that they'll be restricted and they'll be banned from getting any of the wealth that is given to them from the Khalifa, and that they will be sent to the outskirts of the Khilafah at that time on the war fronts, on the battle fronts, and that they will be put in the worst of positions. So the leaders began to tell their followers this, and then this began to affect. This began to what? To have its effect. And this is normal. And at the beginning, the people are all encouraged, the people are all hyped up, and they're there, they're ready. As soon as they begin to get reminded of their wealth, of that they'll be sent to the outskirts of the Khilafah, and that this and that will happen, they begin to slowly what? That enthusiasm begins to die out. That enthusiasm begins, and that's normal everywhere. That's how it has, or that's how it happens everywhere. And then not only that, the female would come to her son and to her husband and to her brother, and they'll tell him, come back, come home. The ones who are here will take care of it. Come to her son, to my son, come home, sleep at home tonight. The ones who are here, they'll take care of it. You wake up in the morning and you come back. So that, and the men who are there are waiting for what? One excuse. One excuse to be given so that they can what? They can leave. And the father would come to his son, come to his brother, would come to his father as well, and so forth. And they were able to what? Slowly, the number began to what? To dwindle down and began to lessen. From 4,000, it went down to 300, 400 by the night time. By the end of the night, Muslim ibn Aqil was standing there on his own. By the end of the night, Muslim ibn Aqil was standing there on his own. And that was the beginning of the signs of what? The beginning signs that it was all just hype. It was all yes, come and give us and we'll help you. But as soon as what? As soon as it gets to the crunch, they gave up. As soon as it gets to the crunch, they separated and they left Muslim ibn Aqil. At this moment, Muslim ibn Aqil, he wrote a letter to Al-Hussein, telling him, do not come to Al-Kufa. Do not come to Al-Kufa. For the people of Al-Kufa, nakithu ahdin. They do not keep their promise. They break their promise. They are not going to be with you. They are not going to stay with you. Muslim ibn Aqil, he's standing there and he's amazed. How at one moment there were 4,000 men standing with me, willing to be with me. By the end of the night, he's standing there alone. From Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. From his what? From his planning and his plotting. And he was able to make those who were around him scatter from around him. He said to his letter to Al-Hussein, ارجع بأهلك ولا يغرنك أهل الكوفة. Return with your family. Do not be deceived by the people of Al-Kufa. فإنهم أصحاب أبيك. He says, for they are those companions or those who are around your father Ali. الذي كان يتمنى فراقهم بالموت أو القتل. The ones that at the end, if you go back to when we spoke about Al-Hussein or when we spoke about Ali radiallahu anhu, at the end of his life, he began to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma inni sa'imtuhum wa sa'imuni. Oh Allah, I'm over them and they are over me. So he has said, these are the ones that your father was making dua for death or to be killed because of them, because of the people of Al-Kufa. I'm sick of them. I'm over them. There's no what? There's no promise. There's no keeping one's promise. So he said, return. For verily they what? Verily they are not going to leave you. إن أهل الكوفة قد كذبوك وكذبوني. The people of Al-Kufa, they lied to you and they lied to me. وَلَيْسَ لِكَاذِبِ الرَّأْيِ. And the liar does not have an opinion. The liar does not have an opinion. And this is mentioned in Al-Bidayah wal-Nihaya and Tarikh al-Tabari. This incident that took place. So Ibn Ziyad, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he ordered for the people, or he ordered for Muslim ibn Aqil to be killed, and then he ordered for Han ibn Urwa to be taken out and to also to be killed. And Han ibn Urwa was from a tribe, a very large tribe by the name of Midhaj. And he kept on calling out to his tribe, and his tribe left him. So Muslim ibn Aqil was killed by the order of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and Han ibn Urwa was killed by the order of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And those two men, were killed, and Al-Hussein is preparing to leave, or on his way leaving already. On his way leaving already from Mecca. And that's why those who were following after the killing of Muslim ibn Aqil and Han ibn Urwa, those who had slight sort of wanting for Hussein and following of Hussein, after seeing that, khalas, they no longer want to follow Al-Hussein. They got scared. They got scared of that which will happen to them. And that's one of the strategies that is followed. The strategy of putting fear in the followers. And that's the strategy that is usually followed. The first thing is to try and put fear in the hearts of the people, so that they fear going against, or that they fear speaking up or seeking their minimal rights. So no one wanted to have anything to do with Al-Hussein. No one wanted from Al-Kufa, wanted anything to do with Al-Hussein. Now Yazid ibn Muawiyah, when this is taking place, he sends a message to Abdullah ibn Abbas. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, who is the Sheikh of Bani Hashim, the scholar, the leader, the elder, and the most knowledgeable one of Bani Hashim. Abdullah ibn Abbas, who was centered or who was in Mecca at the time. He sends a letter to Abdullah ibn Abbas. He's the Sheikh of Bani Hashim at his time. He's the scholar. He's the one who is followed. He says, وَنَحْسَبُ أَنَّ رِجَالًا أَتَوْهُ مِنَ الْمَشْرِقِ فَمَنَّوْهُ بِالْخِلَافَةِ. Says, we think that men came from Al-Mashriq, from towards Al-Kufa, and they promised him or they gave him the desires of the Khilafah. فَإِنَّهُمْ عِنْدَكَ مِنْهُمْ خَبَرٌ. For verily you have the news that has reached you from them. فَإِنْ كَانَ فَعْلَ فَقَدْ قَطَعَ الْقَرَابَةَ وَالرَّحِمِ. If this is what he's doing, then he's cut the ties of kinship and he's cut the ties of any sort of relation. وَأَنْتَ كَبِيرُ أَهْلِ بَيْتِكَ وَالْمَنْظُورِ إِلَيْهِ. And you are the big one of your family and those who are looked towards him. Because Abdullah ibn Abbas, Al-Hussein and Abdullah ibn Abbas are what? They're cousins. Abdullah ibn Abbas and Al-Hussein ibn Ali are cousins. So and Abdullah ibn Abbas at his time, he was the head, or he was the looked up one from Bani Hashim. From Bani Hashim, he was the scholar, he was the knowledgeable one at that time. And he has 60 after Hijri, Abdullah ibn Abbas is at least would be in his 50s. At least Abdullah ibn Abbas would be in his 50s. He's not a young man. And so Al-Hussein was born in which year? Who knows when Al-Hussein was born? Who's born first? Al-Hassan or Al-Hussein? Al-Hassan is born first. Al-Hassan is born in the 3rd year. And Al-Hussein is born in the year after. In the year after. So Al-Hussein at this time, which was in the 60th year. 60th year after Hijrah, Al-Hussein, how old is Al-Hussein now, If he's born in the 4th, 56 years old. He's not young, He's not young. So Al-Hussein at that time, he wasn't young as well. So Ibn Abbas, he sent back to him very short. Says, إِنِّي لَأَرْجُ أَنْ لَا يَكُونَ خُرُوجُهُ لِأَمْرٍ تَكْرَهُ. Says, I hope and I wish that the reason that he has gone out from Mecca to Al-Kufa is for something that you dislike. وَلَسْتُ أَدَعُ النَّصِيحَةَ لَهُ. And I'm not going to leave giving him nasiha. I'm not going to leave advising him. So now Al-Hussein, he's left Mecca and in his way to Al-Kufa, not knowing that his cousin Muslim ibn Aqil has been killed at that time. And that is on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah in the 60th year after the Hijrah of Rasulullah. The 8th of Dhul Hijjah, the last month in the Islamic calendar. He left Mecca going towards Al-Kufa in the 60th year. And many of the Sahaba advised him not to leave. Many of the Sahaba advised him not to go towards Al-Kufa. From them, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Abdullah ibn Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, his brother from the same father. They all advised him to what? They all advised him not to go out towards Al-Kufa. Not to go out towards Al-Kufa. From them was Abdullah ibn Abbas, as we mentioned. I'm not going to go into detail of that. Also was Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Abdullah ibn Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, and also Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, rahimahullah, the son of Ali radiallahu anhu, from other than Fatima. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah was very close with his brothers. And the advice of Ali radiallahu anhu, if you remember, was that he advised his sons, Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein, to take care of their brother Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. For he is their brother. He said to them, he is your brother. You have to protect him, you have to respect him, you have to honor him and take care of him. And then vice versa. He said to Muhammad al-Hanafiyyah, you have to respect and honor your brothers. be with them, be around them, and be from those who respect them and honor them as well. So Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah at this time, in this instance, he wasn't with his brother, meaning that he didn't agree with his brother on going out to Al-Kufa. He said to his brother the same thing that was said by Muslim ibn Aqil, that these are people that your father has tasted bitterness from them. Your father Ali and my father Ali has tasted bitterness from these people, and that they are not from those who are going to uphold their promise that they have given you. And that's why the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, not because they didn't agree with Al-Hussein, it's because they didn't, or they knew of the track record of Ahlul Kufa, that they are not going to uphold their promise. They're not going to be from those. You are much better around your family and around those who are with you, and amongst those who are going to give you victory, those who are going to stand with you, rather than going to those from, or to those that you don't know where they are from. And that's the common sort of points that were raised by those who advised him not to go, were first and foremost having doubt in the intentions of the people of Al-Kufa and not trusting their promise. All of the companions that advised him not to go, they all had doubts in the intentions of the people of Al-Kufa and did not trust them. Did not trust that they will uphold their presence. And all of them predicted that if he goes, this is where he's going to be, or this is where his death will be. We don't trust them. You know what they are capable of doing, and we predict that if you do go, that this will be your death. This will be your death. And that was the common advice that was given towards or to Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu wa arda. The main people who went out with Al-Hussein, he went out with his family, his close direct family, his wives and his children. With him was his two sisters Kulthum and Zainab, and the children of his brother and his brothers Abu Bakr, the brothers of Al-Hussein from other than Fatima, Abu Bakr and Ja'far and Al-Abbas, and the majority of the people in Medina who were from his family, except for Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. Yani all of those who were related to Al-Hussein, his brothers, even his sisters, and his brothers' children, and his cousins, all of them went out with him except for Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah refused to go out with them. And that's why the numbers that remained with Al-Hussein at the end were 72 people. 72 people remained with Al-Hussein at the end when he reached to Karbala. When he reached to Karbala. The areas that he went by on his path to Al-Kufa. Now, Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, his path is towards Al-Kufa, and then he ended up in Karbala because they didn't allow him to enter Al-Kufa. So they pushed him outside towards Karbala. Karbala is towards the north of Al-Kufa. So they pushed him outside of Al-Kufa, didn't allow him to enter, and he stayed, or he settled in Karbala. And that's why, as mentioned in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya and Tarikh al-Tabari, when they settled there, he asked them, what's the name of this land? They said Karbala. He said, Idhan Karbun wa Bala. They said, it's Karbala. He said, Idhan Karbun wa Bala. That hardship and Bala, and that fitna and hardship will befall them. So he started with a Tan'im on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. And then he went to a place called As-Safah. And in this place he was met by Al-Firazdaq. Al-Firazdaq is a famous poet and linguistic in the Arabian history. Al-Firazdaq. So he asked him, فقال له, Al-Hussein said to Al-Firazdaq, بين لنا نبأ الناس من خلفك. Tell us of the news of the people who are behind you. فقال من الخبير سألت. You have asked the person who is knowledgeable. قلوب الناس معك وسيوفهم مع بني أمية. He said to him, قلوب الناس معك. The hearts of the people are with you. وسيوفهم مع بني أمية. But their swords are with Bani Umayyah. Their hearts are with you. They are there with you, but their swords are with Bani Umayyah. Meaning that they forced to be with Bani Umayyah. As you'll see, one of the heads of the army that was sent towards Al-Kufa, Umar ibn Sa'd, the head of the army was sent, he was going towards Al-Ray, and then he was redirected by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad towards Al-Hussein. And then when he gave him the orders, Umar ibn Sa'd refused. He said, no, I'm not going towards Al-Hussein, until he was threatened with his family, with his house, with his life, that he had to what? That he had to return towards Al-Hussein. The hard of them are with you, meaning that those who have the least amount of knowledge and respect and love for Rasulullah and his family will have that love for Al-Hussein. For they know that they are what? That they are the ones that the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that they are the youths of Jannah, that they are given the promise of Jannah. So when he said that, and this is mentioned in Tariq al-Tabari, when he said that, this was the beginning of the path of Al-Hussein. Now when he reached an area called Batn al-Rumma, he rode towards the people of Iraq in his position, and that he is coming to them. And that is with one of the messengers, Qais bin Mishar al-Saydawi. And then that messenger was caught by the army of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and he was sent to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and he was killed. Meaning that the message didn't reach to the people of Al-Kufa. And then he reached to a place called Zarud. In this place, the news of the death of Muslim ibn Aqil reached to Al-Hussein. The death of Muslim and Hani reached to Al-Hussein, so he said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And this had a very heavy effect on Al-Hussein, that his cousin and the one who was in Al-Kufa, they were both killed. So it had a very heavy effect on Al-Hussein. And then at that moment he said to those who are around him, Man ahabba an yansarif fal yansarif. After that news reached him, he had a large number with him. After that news reached him, he said, whoever wants to leave can leave. Whoever wants to leave can leave. So the people started to what? فَتَفَرَّقَ النَّاسُ عَنْهُ يَمِينًا وَشِمَالًا. The people started to what? Desert him, started to leave him from the right and from the left. And only those who left with him from Medina remained with him, meaning his what? His family. They were the only ones who remained with him at that time. When he reached to the area after it, that's when the letter arrived to him that was sent by Muslim, warning him against the people of Al-Kufa. The letter reached him now. The letter reached him now, and he's already halfway or further than halfway to Al-Kufa. The letter reached him that the people of Al-Kufa have what? Have deserted you. The people of Al-Kufa have left you. And then he reached to an area called Sharaf, and that was the first day of Muharram. That was the first day of Muharram. And then they saw one of the men of the followers of the family of Al-Hussein. He says, I can see from far palm trees. So they said to him, there's no such thing as palm trees here. This is an open land. There's no such thing as palm trees. And then as they got closer, it was the what? The front of the army of Ahl al-Kufa. It was the front of the army of Ahl al-Kufa that was sent by, or the leadership of Al-Hurr ibn Yazid. Al-Hurr ibn Yazid, he was the leader of that group. And he was given the orders to what? He was given the orders to keep beside Al-Hussein, to not allow him to enter Al-Kufa. He wasn't given the order to fight him, wasn't given the order to push him, to shove him. Given the order to what? To just remain next to him and not allow him to what? Not allow him to enter into Al-Kufa and to push him away from Al-Kufa. And that's where he began to be pushed after he reached, he was supposed to get to Al-Qadisiyah. After Al-Qadisiyah is Al-Kufa. He was pushed away from these areas towards Karbala, towards a land called Karbala. And that's when he asked about the name. And all of this is mentioned in the history books of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Now after that, that was in the first of the month of Muharram, the 61st year after Hijrah, when he met with the initial part of the army of Ahl al-Kufa. And they were 1,000 men under the leadership of Al-Hurr ibn Ziyad. And then when Al-Hurr ibn Ziyad, he sent his orders with Al-Kufa, when Al-Hussein told him that we have letters that have been sent from Ahlul Kufa to come and to give victory to them, he said that we are not the ones who have sent this, and we are not the ones who what? We don't have nothing to do with these letters that were sent. So Al-Hurr, he said to Al-Hussein, he said, if you have any understanding, you would leave and you would turn back and you would not do that which you are coming to do. So Al-Hussein, he said to Al-Hurr ibn Ziyad, he said, ثَكَلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ. ثَكَلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ, which is a term that is used by the Arab. He said, ثَكَلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ. So Al-Hurr, he said, only if it was someone other than you, or Al-Hussein, I would have killed them and I would have killed their mother for saying this. If it was someone other than you, but because it's you, I can't do nothing. And because your mother is Fatima, I can't say nothing. So he told him, if it was anyone else, it would have been a different response. But he respected Al-Hussein, and he respected the mother of Al-Hussein. He said, we have given the orders not to leave your side until we bring you to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. And I have not been given the order to kill you or to fight you. I've only been given the order to keep with you until you reach to Al-Kufa. And he reached to Ibn Ziyad. If you don't want this, then take a path away from Al-Kufa and away from the path returning to Medina. Meaning that I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to force you, but if you're going to continue, then go on a path away from Al-Kufa and go on a path that doesn't take you back to Medina. So that I'm not the one who what? I'm not the one who cops it. For saying that you let him return, that you let him go back and go away from Al-Kufa. So I'm not told why you bring him to Al-Kufa on his own free will without bringing him as captured. So that was the Al-Hurr ibn Ziyad. He said, and write to Yazid, and I'll write to Ibn Ziyad, فَلَعَلَّ اللَّهَ أَنْ يَرْزُقَنِي الْعَافِيَةِ. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He pardon me from مِنْ أَنْ أَبْتَلِيَ بِشَيْءٍ مِنْ أَمْرِكَ, that I'm fall or that anything from your matter falls upon me. يعني مبدي ابتلي فيك. I don't want to be the one who what? I don't want to be the one who has to do anything to you. Take another path, write to Yazid if you want to, I'll write to Ibn Ziyad, and that's it. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will what? Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not put me in a position where this will have to happen or anything will have to happen. So Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, he took the left away from Al-Qadisiyah and he took towards the path of Al-Sham. And then he stopped in Karbala. And then Al-Hurr, he's marching with him side by side. He said to him, and he began to advise him not to fight, and that if he's going to fight, that it will end up in his death, because he can see the numbers that are with him. There's 72 people with him. If you're going to fight, you're not going to be victorious. So Al-Hurr is what? Al-Hurr is advising him. And Al-Hussein is praying Imam with both armies. And Al-Hussein is praying Imam, and the followers that are with him are following him. And the army of Al-Hurr, which was 1,000 men, are also praying behind Al-Hussein. So there was no friction there. There was no friction there. And then they were ordered by, a letter came from Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad to Al-Hurr to make sure that Al-Hussein does not stop in an area of water or an area that has any population in it, to keep him away from the people. And that's what happened with Al-Hussein. He was pushed towards an area with no water and pushed towards an area that there's no population. Don't want him to be around any people. On the Friday, the third day after Hussein, he arrived to Karbala. The rest of the army came, which was 4,000 men, by the leadership of Umar ibn Sa'ad, who was originally going towards Ar-Ray, to fight at Daylam, the areas in that direction. So he had refused. After he was told to go to Al-Hussein, he refused. And then when he was threatened, he had no choice but to return and to go towards Al-Hussein. Now when Al-Hussein saw this army, 5,000 against 72, he knew that he has no ability, he can't withstand them. He can't stand up to them and he can't fight them. So he began to negotiate with Umar ibn Sa'ad. Now the negotiations begin. Now here, Umar ibn Sa'd, he sends to Al-Hussein a messenger, asking him what has he come for and what is he asking for. So Al-Hussein, he says, and he makes it clear that I've only come by the request of Ahlul Kufa. And he said to it that the people of Ahlul Kufa have sent me here, or have sent for me to come to them. فَإِذْ قَدْ كَرِهُونِي فَأَنَا رَاجِعٌ إِلَى مَكَّةَ. If they don't want me to come anymore, then I shall return to Mecca وَأَذَرُكُمْ. I'll return to Mecca and I'll leave you. I came by the request of Ahlul Kufa. If Ahlul Kufa no longer want me to come, to attend, to come to Al-Kufa, then I'll leave them and I'll return to Mecca. I'll leave them and I'll return to Mecca. But back to the first point that I said, the spark of this fitna was by what? By Yazid insisting that Al-Hussein has to give bay'ah. Yazid insisted, meaning that it would have been sufficient enough to say that, okay, go back to Mecca and that's it, khalas, nothing has happened, nothing's gone on. But no, there was insistence. He insisted that Al-Hussein gives bay'ah, meaning that he wanted to break the head. He wanted to make sure that this isn't tried again. And Al-Hussein is obviously refusing. So he said that I'll go and I'll leave this. So when Umar ibn Sa'd, this reached to Umar ibn Sa'd, he said, Alhamdulillah. He said, Alhamdulillah. وَكَفَى اللَّهُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ الْقِتَالِ. And khalas, you don't need to what? If we're not going to fight, then you're not going to fight. He said that, إِنِّي أَرْجُ أَن يُعَافِيَنَ اللَّهُ أَن يُعَافِيَنِي اللَّهُ مِنْ حَرْبِهِ. I hope that Allah pardons me and does not involve me in any fighting with him, as mentioned in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. So here Umar ibn Sa'd, he sends that to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. So Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he sends to Umar ibn Sa'd. And he had used a few abiyat sha'r, meaning that now that they have seen the strength of the army, now that they have seen the strength of the enemy, now they want to come from what? From below. He's talking about Al-Hussein, saying that Al-Hussein now he's become weak and he's coming to us from below, asking us to let him leave. So Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, now he grew ahead, as we say. And now he thinks himself that he's what? He's in a position of power. So he sends a letter back, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, أما بعد فقد بلغني كتابك. Your letter has reached me. وفهمت ما ذكرت, and I have understood that which you said. فأعرض على الحسين أن يبايع ليزيد بن معاوية. He said, I've understood what you've said. Offer to Al-Hussein to give bay'ah, to give pledge of allegiance to Yazid ibn Muawiyah, huwa wa ashabuh, him and his companions, those who are with him, to give bay'ah to Yazid. فَإِذَا فَعَلَ ذَلِكَ رَأَيْنَا رَأْيَنَا وَالسَّلَامِ. If he does that, then we'll think about what we are going to do. If he does that, then we'll think about what we are going to do. Meaning that after Al-Hussein put forward, saying, if they don't want me to come, then I'll leave. I'll return to Mecca, and that's it, khalas. I came from the request of Ahlul Kufa. When that response came to Umar ibn Sa'd from the governor Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, it's like his whole face just changed. And there's room there for negotiation, and you're just making it what? More difficult. And he was happy, Umar ibn Sa'd was happy. Then when the letter came back from the governor, it's like he just ruined everything again. You have to give what? Bay'ah to Yazid. And then that's when he said, قَدْ حَسِبْتُ أَنْ لَا يَقْبَلَ ابْنُ زِيَادٍ الْعَافِيَةِ. I had the thought that Ibn Ziyad will not accept the afiyah, will not accept the easy path and the easy way. Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, of course, he rejected this offer. He said, I'm not going to give bay'ah to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. I'm not going to be the one who will give him bay'ah. So here now, after we said that he was kept away from the water and a little conflict happened there, but one of the followers of the army, he yelled out to Al-Hussein, said, Ya Hussein, أما تنظر إلى الماء والله لا تذوق منه قطرة حتى تموت عطشا. He said to Al-Hussein, he said, can you see the water? He said, by Allah, you're not going to drink a drop of it until you die of thirst. He said this to Al-Hussein. You're not going to drink a drop of this water until you die of thirst. So Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, he returns back to him, he says, Allahumma qtulhu atashan. Al-Hussein, he replied, he said, "Oh Allah, let him die from thirst. Let him die from thirst." And the books of history, you go through them, they tell you that this man, by the name of Abdullah bin Abi al-Hussein al-Azdi, he died from thirst. He died from thirst. From the dua of Al-Hussein, Allahumma qtulhu atashan. Oh Allah, let him die of thirst. And then he actually died of thirst. So when Al-Hussein now can see the severity and the sort of the toughness of the situation and how dangerous the situation is, he requested for a meeting with Umar ibn Sa'd. And this meeting, throughout the meeting, Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, he offered Umar ibn Sa'd one of three things. He offered Umar ibn Sa'd one of three things. This is the last sort of negotiation that took place prior to the actual battle happening. And this is the last thing that we'll mention tonight. So Umar ibn Sa'd, he came to Al-Hussein. And Al-Hussein, he said, okay, there are three things. I'll offer you three things. This is my last sort of negotiation that I'm going to happen. He said, إِمَّا أَن تَدَعُونِي فَأَلْحَقَ بِالثُّغُورِ. He says, you either leave me and I go and I follow the thughur. I go to the outskirts of the Khilafah and I join the battles there and I join the armies there and I fight there. إِمَّا أَن تَدَعُونِي فَأَلْحَقَ بِالثُّغُورِ. Either leave me and let me go to the battlefronts and fight in the battlefronts. وَإِمَّا أَنْ أَذْهَبَ إِلَى يَزِيدٍ. Or you let me go on my own to Yazid. And I speak with him and he speaks with me. Or you let me go to Yazid. أو أرد إلى المدينة. Or I return to Medina. One of three things. Either let me go to the battlefront, either let me go to Yazid, or let me go back to Medina. One of these three things. These are the options that I am putting on the table. And this is mentioned in Siyar A'lam al-Nubala and is mentioned in the Shia resources. It's mentioned in the Shia resources. مقتل الحسين لأبي مخنف and معالم المدرستين للسيد مرتضى العسكري. From the books of the Shia, this is mentioned. That he gave them the three options. I either go to the battlefront, I either go to Yazid, or I go back to Medina. One of these three options. Umar ibn Sa'd was over the moon. Beautiful. This is going to happen. There's no way that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is going to reject this. Beautiful. Khalas, it's ended here, it's done here. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. When this offer was put forward to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and one of the followers there, who will mention his name last week, we mentioned too many names this week. When one of the followers who was there heard this and realized that there might be some room for reconciliation, he began to spark the fire under Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and make him reject that offer and tell him, no, you have to come and give bay'ah to Yazid. And that was the end of the what? That was the end of the negotiations. And that's when now the order is given for the armies to what? For the armies, or it's not an army, for a group against an army, for the fighting to begin. And we'll mention that in detail next week, bi'idhnihi ta'ala, to understand the reality and the authentic narrations that have been narrated by Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. That's why from the beautiful books, the history books, is Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, he is a later scholar. He's in the 8th century. Ibn Kathir, the same one who has Tafsir Ibn Kathir, he has the history book Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. The book Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, he mentions both narrations. And then he authenticates the narration that is authentic according to the science of hadith, according to the science of history, not because he wants to, not because he likes this story more than this story. No. Our ulama have what? Our ulama are trustworthy when it comes to these matters. So if this narration is authentic, they'll say it's authentic, even if it's against him. That's why one of the Shafi'i scholars, Al-Imam Ad-Daraqutni, he was asked about the recitation of the Basmala out loud. The Shafi'iyya, they recite the Basmala out loud in the Salat. So he was asked about reciting. He says, one of the students asked him, says, "Oh Imam, is there any authentic hadith that mentions reciting the Fatiha out loud? So Ad-Daraqutni is a Shafi'i and he recites the Fatiha out loud. But his trustworthiness and the ilm and this, the sacredness of the ilm, he says, no, there is not a hadith that is sahih in the mas'ala of al-jahr bil-basmala. So the ulama of Ahl Sunnah have what? Trustworthiness. They follow that which is what? According to the sciences that are around. So these books, they bring you both stories, they bring you the narrations, and then they tell you which of the narration is authentic. Not according to their own following, but according to the science of al-jarh wa al-ta'deel, and mustalah hadith, and ilm al-rijal, and so forth. All of these different sciences that construct the what? Construct the structure that protects the science of hadith. That protects the science of hadith. So inshallah ta'ala, the reason that we want to mention the authentic narrations, that which actually took place in the battle of Karbala, that which happened to the death of Al-Hussein, instead of just knowing or just hearing stories. A lot of people heard a lot of stories. This happened, that happened. We want to just authenticate and mention that which is authentic. So next week, inshallah, we'll mention the actual fighting and that which took place, the lead up to it, and then the death of Al-Hussein, and then what happened to Al-Hussein, and what happened to the family of Al-Hussein as well, those who remained after his death. Radiallahu anhu arda, a truly sad moment in the history of Islam. The death of Al-Hussein is a truly sad moment. And we are saddened by it. We are saddened by the death of Al-Hussein. ولكن, as the Nabi ﷺ, he says, وَلَا نَقُولُ إِلَّا مَا يُرْضِ اللَّهِ. We only say that which pleases Allah. We only say that which what? Which pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. If you enjoy our content, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you're on Facebook, like our page. And if you're on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.